Hey y'all, I'm Kim, host of Book Marketing Mania, and I'm so thrilled you're tuning in to learn how to build your audience and reach new readers as a podcast host and guest. We often talk about starting to market your book before you have it published, but what does that really look like, especially on a podcast? That's the question we're answering today with my special guest, Billie Jauss. Billie is the author of several books, including Baseball Family, 9 Core Qualities for Developing Healthy Relationships. And Billie also hosts the Family Room podcast. This is Billie's first time as a guest, but you may be familiar with her name as I shared tips from her as a podcast host on episode 124 and episode 100, because Billie is so generous and full of wisdom, y'all. Today, we're going to talk all about podcasting and how Billie identifies her target readers' pain points and connection points and is able to answer those on her podcast and share from her book in a way that's serving her readers, not selling to them. You're in for a treat today, so let's get to it. Hey, Billie, I'm so excited to have you on Book Marketing Mania to serve my listeners today.
I am so excited to be with you. Anytime I get to spend time with you to chat and do all the things, I always love it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is so fun. So Billie, tell us about your book, Baseball Family, and who your target audience is.
Yeah, so Baseball Family was born out of a hard friendship that broke and hit me out of the blue, that it went wrong. You know, when you've had those real deep connections with somebody and something happens and it all falls apart. Mm-hmm. And the Lord just kept taking me back to, how have you navigated your baseball family life? My husband's been in pro ball for 37 plus years. And how have I navigated that life when I don't get to choose the people that are around me, but I still am called to love them as Christ has loved us? And so that's where Baseball Family came from. You don't need to understand baseball to read the book. Mm-hmm. I just had a lady get in touch with me this morning. She's like, I thought I was going to hate this book and I can't put it down. I'm like, oh, thanks, But yeah, the target audience is really people that want to cultivate healthy relationships with the people that God places in front of them wherever he puts them. And so as writers, that's a whole new lesson to learn as to how do we navigate these relationships with followers? Mm-hmm. How do we move forward in connecting with all the people?
Yeah. I love that so much too, to think about. Everybody says like there's no new ideas out there, right? There's these topics have been talked about, but yet we can bring our own unique twist to things, like your experiences with baseball. And like you said, you don't have to be anybody that loves baseball or even knows anything about the sport to get extreme value from this book, as far as your relationships go. I love that so much. So I want to talk to you, Billie, about podcasting, because you're a podcast host like myself. And I know you've been a guest on podcast. And I know that recently on your podcast, you also talked through some of the chapters and some of the topics in your book. I shouldn't say chapters, because I love how you did it. It really was topical, like you're really trying to serve your listeners. It wasn't just, hey, let me read you my book. So I appreciate that. So I want you to talk about, for our listeners, maybe they're writing their first book and they're trying to build their audience and they're trying to think about different ways they can do that. And with both of us love podcasting so much, will you talk a little bit about maybe how that has helped you as a host and a guest to build your own author platform and connect with new readers?
Yeah, I think that I love to talk to people, and the writing world can be sort of lonely and isolating, right? We could spend hours in our junky office, which is quite like a tornado right now, by ourselves and never really interact that much with outside people. And then the introvert on podcasting. So podcasting for me as an extrovert, I feel like I'm talking to somebody. I feel like I've got you in my family room, because my podcast is called The Family Room. I feel like I've got you in my family room. We've got our favorite drinks in hand, coffee, tea, water, whatever it may be, soda. And we're just sitting with a blanket over our laps and just chatting, right? Mm-hmm. But for an introvert with podcasting, if you don't really feel comfortable with that one-on-one interaction with people or multiple people in groups, podcasting is a great way to do a solo podcast where you can comfortably talk with someone,
Mm-hmm.
whoever that may be, whoever you're writing to. And that way you can get bits and pieces of the message out. And you
Mm-hmm.
can see what connects with people and what doesn't. A lot of times, I don't know about you, Kim, I don't get a whole lot of feedback from my podcast. But when I put it on social media that podcast is up and what are your thoughts on it, that's when I get that, wow, that real girl, I can't believe that hit me the way it did. And then that's something I want to lean into more. It's actually how I came to the 4 relationships that I talk about in my book, Baseball Family, the 4 relationships we encounter every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did a podcast on the 4 friendships,
Yeah.
people that we run into. And I'm telling you, I had more people say to me, the freedom that gave me, that I don't have to give the same energy, time, and effort to everybody. I'm not going to be everybody's best friend, and I don't have to be. And so that's when I pulled those 4 relationships into the book. That really the main points of the book are the 9 core qualities for
Mm-hmm.
developing healthy relationships. But then I put it into those 4 relationships we encounter every day: accidental acquaintance, person you run into; social circle, the person that you may be at Bible study with or in a small group with, mom's group with, whatever. And then kindred spirit, that person that you're like, hey, I like you, I want to know more about you. And then forever family, which are the people that go to war for you without knowing you're in a war, right?
Uh-huh.
So long story short, that is the value of a podcast, that you find a comfortable way. If you want to interview people, that's awesome. It's fun to interview
Mm-hmm.
people. I think I did one podcast with interviews, and with my crazy schedule with 3
Mm-hmm.
grown sons and a husband, and nobody lives near each other. My husband rarely lives near me in baseball. So it's like I'm always on the go. And it just got to be a logistical thing for me that
Uh-huh.
I couldn't schedule enough podcasts when I was home. And then it was taking the whole time I was home. And, it was just all the
Yeah.
things that I went to solo. And me doing a podcast, it's just a way to get information out. And like you said, I've been doing episodes about the book, but the information I'm doing on the podcast is supplemental to the book. So what I'm wanting to do is take my readers on a journey. I started the podcast episodes with the 9 core qualities when my book launch team was going through it. And that way I could put in my book launch team emails, hey, I hope you've read this section of the book. Because like you said, I didn't do chapters. I went a little
Mm-hmm.
rogue
Yeah.
on this. And did you read this section of the book? If you want to learn more, here's the podcast. And it was really a good way to connect with my book launch team.
Uh-huh.
And I was also answering questions that I had been asked.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm finding those little pain points or connection points that they can make in that podcast, because we can't write everything in a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can't do it. So, and you learn so much after writing the book once people start reading it more and asking questions. And I want to know more about this, like my first book was Making Room, Doing Less So God Can Do More. It's about the busyness of life. How do we simplify, right?
Uh-huh.
In one little section of that book, I had something about the internal distractions. And that was the thing that people resonated with the most. So my second book was Distraction Detox: Release Emotional Barriers, Realize God's Best. So that's where we go into releasing those emotional toxins. But I wouldn't have done that book and gone through it in my own life if people didn't start bringing it up after I wrote that first book and did podcasts about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And get asked all the different questions. That's what I was thinking about with your baseball family. Just again, how you've kind of taken that onto your podcast. And again, not, addressing the topics, not just saying, okay, let's read chapter 1, because then automatically your listeners think, well, I don't have the book. I don't know what chapter 1 is. Right. And they might discover your podcast and they get to hear that. And then they're going to go check out your book. Or like you say, it's supplemental to your book. But I love that you can take that topic angle and then just twist it so many different ways, to reach the listeners, whatever their needs are. And I love too that like Billie talked about, you used to host an interview podcast and now you have a solo podcast. And that's definitely one of the things I love about podcasting is it's not set in stone. Like you just do it however works for you. And like you traveling all the time, you figure out what works for you. And if that is not working for you, then change it. You're still sold on podcasting, but you're going to make it work for you and your family life. And so, I love that so much. So let's talk about book marketing, Billie. So a lot of our listeners, they think of, and I'm horrible probably about advocating for this. I need to be better about it myself, but I love marketing, but I didn't really realize how many people really thought of book marketing as only something that happens after your book is in hand. And so let's talk about that because you've had obviously several books under your belt now. Do you feel like, oh gosh, I wish I would have started sooner? Or, can you help share with the listeners how they can be thinking, oh yeah, I need to start talking about this a lot sooner than when I have my book in my hand?
Yeah, one of the things that I've found that's just come with age in publishing, and I've not been that long, 9 years I've been writing. So, it hasn't been that long really. And I've got 3 books out. And the thing that with the first book, I wish I had used some of the topics and materials to put out more on social media and in my newsletter to get feedback from people because I could have really fleshed it out more. And you're not only marketing the topics, you're actually teasing the topics to gain more information, to dig deeper in as you write the book. And then in turn, those topics have already been planted as seeds in their head. So they're following you because they want to know more about what you're offering with that. So that when the book comes out, you're like, here, all those things I've been talking about is here in this tidy little book. And you can take it and use it and make notes and grow from it. So I feel like I did that more with Baseball Family just because my life in baseball is my life in baseball. So I think I was already pouring out content before I wrote the book because my husband and I believe that baseball is our mission field. It is not for fame, fortune, notoriety. It is a mission field where God has placed us to love the people he puts in front of us. And that's really hard to do when you don't get to choose the women that you are going to spend 6 months pretty intimately with almost every day, right? So I had to navigate those ways. And I did that a lot on social media. If a mom asked me a question, I'd ask, social media about relationships or encounters or even my baseball life of travel. My kids swear I'm going to die in an Uber because I tend to get in an Uber. And before I get out, I know their life story and I probably pray for them. I will ask anyone if I can pray with them. And for some reason, they say yes. And I pray in the name of Jesus, and not all of them are Jesus lovers. So had a nice little conversation with a young man in Omaha, Nebraska this weekend that led to me talking about Jesus and just my love for him and how my life has changed. And we never know what those opportunities are going to be.
Yes.
Book marketing in those moments that we're putting out those stories. Now, in the past, I put out that story on social media going, well, here's another encounter of when I could have been murdered in an Uber or whatever, however I phrase it. But it's really about the relational exchange that I'm having with someone that I just met and probably will never see again. But I feel that God's called me to pour love into them. So I would put stories like that out. And some people would be like, you're an idiot. You're going to die. And some people were like, wow, I really have a hard time asking people if I can pray for them. And then I'd write, well, you don't have to ask. Just pray to yourself. You don't have to pray out loud if you're not comfortable. And so those were things that I pulled into the book when I gave examples of how do we show one of the 9 core qualities, inclusion, to an Uber driver or someone sitting on the plane with us. And so that information was helped in the marketing of it. And now that the book is out, I feel like there's been more support in buying the book because people feel like they want more of what they've already seen. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
It's not that I'm teasing them just to sell books. I'm giving them value. And I'm leaning into where they are by responding to what it is that they're asking about or they're sharing. And that helps tie into the book and what they're going to learn in the book.
Yeah. And I'm just a big advocate of like marketing is just letting people know how you can help them, no matter what. It may not, it might be your book. It may not be. It might be your podcast. It may not be. It might be just like you say, shining an example. You're just out there living life, right? And you're going to share the beauty of Jesus. And I was thinking about one time I was in Walmart not too long ago, and I was checking out, and a lady was like, "Hey, does that work?" And I'm like, what? And she was like, pointing at my shirt, like I had some, something about prayer on my shirt. I don't know. I wear those shirts all the time and I forget about them. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it does. And, talked to her for a few minutes and left. And I got to thinking later, like, oh man, that was a golden opportunity. I should have asked if I could pray for her, but I thought it's just, you just never know what, obviously that was on my shirt, but I mean, you just never know, how people are going to see you acting a certain way, or, just listening to them and being compassionate. And like you say, you're just being genuine Billy in an Uber. And I love that you're talking about that experience, because my gosh, that's all we see in the news, but we forget there are, people out there driving Uber, and we need to share God's love with them. And what a great, I mean, that sounds like so much like you're a lot outgoing, like my husband, like he just, never meets a stranger. And it would be the same way, get out of the Uber and know their life story and be calling them up to invite them, to their house or whatever. It's just so crazy.
For me, it's just like as authors, and when we're talking about marketing and we're online and we have followers, we have some of those people that may follow us or may stumble upon our public Instagram account and make a comment. How are we going to interact with them versus someone that follows us all the time and responds all the time? It's not going to be the same, but it's going to be with the same outpouring of love that we're going to give to everybody. We're not going to ignore, and I've seen this happen. I'm not going to call out any individual or 10 individuals, but I've seen it happen where authors have their little clique. They had their clique of other author friends. Podcasters have their clique of other podcast friends. And they don't, you go on and you support them and you share their posts and you like and you whatever, and they don't do that for you.
Right.
And then you've got the people that you've never met in your life that are pushing everything. They're sharing every meme you've got, every video that you've got, every reel you're posting, like they're sharing away. And that's where we have to realign how we look at social media and our newsletters and all of that, as how are we going to build these relationships with people, and how are we going to interact with them, making sure that everyone feels included, that we're generously giving value to everyone, and that they can trust us. Now, not everyone that follows you can you be trustworthy and being vulnerable and open. That's your smaller group of followers or your friends that you're on with, right? And so that's where in marketing a book or even marketing a brand, marketing a message, it doesn't have to be a podcast.
Yeah.
If God put something on your heart and that's what you feel like your message and your calling and your purpose is right now, go for it until God tells you it's not that anymore. Right? So in that marketing, in those spaces, it's realizing, how can we connect with these people on a genuine level, but we don't have to treat everyone exactly the same? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like our book launch team, when you have a book, is going to be, you're going to give them way more value than you're even giving online. You should give your email list more value than what you have online.
Yeah.
If you're going to announce something, you get that group. I've a semi-small email list, but they are mighty and powerful. It's like TV, man. I ask them to do something, they 95% of them do it. It feels like 5%, but I have an open rate of about 62%. So that's really good. And I feel like it's because I'm trying to always serve them, give them value, give them something, lead them somewhere else. If someone asks a question, I answer it to the whole group. Because if one person has a question, everybody has it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that way, it's not all about us. God did not give us a message to put us on a pedestal. God did not give us a word to make us look good. He has called us to serve him and to love others as he has loved us, so that they know we are his disciple. It's not about us. It's about serving the audience, serving the readers, serving the listeners. And I think that's huge when it comes to marketing a message, no matter what form it's in.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And I think because people always remember that, right? They're going to remember how you made them feel, right? Service over selling is my big thing too. And I mean, I know it's yours too,
Absolutely.
Billy. And just, yeah, that's just what it's all about. Like that's what he's asking us to do. And so, if I'm thinking about that, I know I've talked to a lot of people that are considering starting a podcast. They've thought about it. They're like, oh, yeah, I've been thinking about it for a couple of years. Or some people even say, I bought a microphone and I never did anything with it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, please, please, please just get started. If God laid that on your heart, just get out there and get started. And I think getting started is the easy thing. It's keeping up with it and, getting your momentum going and coming up with ideas after that. But what encouragement would you have to share with somebody that's thinking about starting a podcast, but they just haven't done it yet?
The good old Nike line, the tagline for Nike, just
Yeah.
do it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to know if it's going to be something that you enjoy doing until you do it. You're not going
Yeah.
to know if the message is valuable until you do it.
Mhm.
I'm not one of the podcast hosts that has thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads. I
Mhm.
don't. I do it out of obedience because God, actually, my first podcast was called Start Small, Believe Big.
Yeah. Yeah.
Start small with the small steps, believing in the big God, and you just go. And I did over 200 episodes on that one, which blows me away. I can't
Yeah.
believe I did 200 episodes.
Yeah.
Then the Lord was like, we're going to readjust here. We're going to move into writing something you swore you never were going to write, Billy, about baseball. And I swore I'd never write about baseball. And the Lord really put it on my heart to sort of go in that direction.
Mhm.
So that's when I started the family room. But you're not going to know if it's something that you're really going to do until you do it.
Mhm.
Make a plan ahead of time. Have at least 10 episodes where you know what you're going to talk about
Mhm.
and get on and talk about it. Figure out the layout of your podcast. Like, how are you going to do? Are you going to do a solo podcast? Are you going to do a
Mhm.
podcast where you interview other people? Are you, all of those things? I feel like that all has to be done before you start, worrying about where to
Mhm.
host it,
Yeah.
how to record it, all of that stuff. I've had friends that record their entire podcast on telephones. I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a really huge influencer friend that 90% of his stuff, he's a sports guy.
Uh-huh.
He's
Yeah.
got a huge following, and 90% of what he does is on his phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you start listening to people, well, your sound quality needs to be this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
No,
Yes.
don't worry about all that
Yeah.
stuff. If the Lord's going to use a message for one person to be transformed, what does it matter?
Mhm.
Not that I want my podcast to sound terrible.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to invest in thousands of dollars. I started
Mhm.
out with a microphone that was $19.95.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I held it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have a stand for it.
Right.
And I held it. And I used GarageBand on my
Uh-huh.
first episode. And I just recorded my 42nd episode for the family room today. So I've done over 250 episodes on GarageBand that is free.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's free. And I upload it to Libsyn, which is like
Uh-huh.
$40 a month, which
Uh-huh.
seems like a lot of money, but that's what I use because
Uh-huh.
someone said it. And when I started, they said it's simple, it's easy, just do it. And that's
Yeah.
just do it.
Yeah.
And I'm still there. It's worked very well for me in the past. I've had producers
Uh-huh.
that wanted to make my show better and better and better. And
Right. Yes.
great for them, but it was too much money. It was too
Uh-huh.
much time, energy, and effort. And it was just a cost that I did not feel that I needed to incur.
Mhm.
And so, so going back to, if you want to start a podcast, just do it.
Mhm.
Buy a
Yeah.
microphone, get a cheap microphone, use your headphones for
Yeah.
goodness sake. I think it's $17.99 for headphones that plug into your
Right.
phone
Yeah.
or your Samsung or whatever, and use those. I've seen many really good podcasts. I've been on over 70 some podcasts being
Mhm.
interviewed about my books and stuff.
Yeah.
I've seen many of people on of some pretty good podcasts
Uh-huh.
with just the earphones with the
Uh-huh.
string that tie
Uh-huh.
in somewhere. I don't know,
Yeah.
So I'd say just do it. Be more concerned about your content than your
Mhm.
quality.
Mhm.
Your content over your quality. And then at some point, if you want to invest in quality, then go for it.
Mhm.
But really invest your time, energy, and effort in your content. and serve an audience. I was told in the beginning, just choose one person and talk to that one person. And that was more overwhelming to me than just talking and teaching.
Yes, yes. And sometimes you just have to get on, like you just have to talk through some of those things to even figure out who are you trying to serve, and what do you not want to talk about?
Exactly. Like you don't know who you're serving until you start serving a bunch of people and a few bag out and a few, step in and a few just stay in the background. And then you narrow down who is that person. I'm more about psychographics than I am demographics. So when people are like, who do you serve in your podcast? 25 to 35
Yes.
moms with 3 kids and blue eyes and black hair. And no,
Yeah.
I am serving women that need to know that they are seen and known and loved by God. And how can they see, know, and love others with the love that God has poured in them? And that's who I serve. And that might be a 65-year-old, an 80-year-old, or a 12-year-old, because I feel like I want to give them practical ways to disseminate the information that God is pouring into them, the calling that God has put on them, that they can pour it out. So think about, what is the mental state of the person? What is the transformation you want to see them have?
Yeah.
And when you put that together with the message that God's given you, if that's about grief or anxiety or communication or relationships or to moms or, whatever, then you know where you are and what you're leaning into. Get those 10 topics that you're going to do so you can get those 10 episodes out quickly. And just do it. If you make a mistake, say sorry. I rarely take out stuff in my podcast.
Yeah.
I rarely edit. Now, if the phone rings, my goodness, my boy, sometimes I'll forget to do not disturb. So earlier I was recording a podcast. One of my sons called and I'm like, oh. And then, the TV went from mute to on. Really weird, but it happened. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. So I just cut those little pieces out. But 99% of the time, if I cough or if I have to clear my throat or if I get choked, I don't take it out.
Yeah.
I want you to feel like you're in my family room, right?
Yeah.
Am I perfect when I'm sitting in my family room? No, I'm just me. I might get choked on a glass of water and I'm coughing and then we start laughing and, who knows, I might break the ice for something very vulnerable and transparent to open up. And so those are things that I don't worry about a whole lot. Maybe that's why I don't have the thousands and thousands of downloads, but I love the people that listen to my podcast and feedback on it and just serving the Lord in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I so agree. And just, I think we need to be sharing that more. It's just, it doesn't have to be this like perfected studio, big fancy thing. And it's like, that's not what God's calling us to. And if we're just, showing up and serving and being obedient. And I love that you talk about just, leaving the mistakes in there. It's like, I always used to worry about like, oh no, this is the lawnmower is going off outside or something's going on. It's like, who cares? We need to show everybody you can do this. It does not matter. And as long as you're bringing value to the show, like you just talked about, nobody cares what's going on in the background. It's like, because I hear you, they're not caring.
I even have a woodpecker. So I have a woodpecker. He decides to get on the gutters, man, and it rattles the whole house.
How funny.
Like, do I take the woodpecker out or do I even mention it? I don't even mention anything about it. I just keep going. I'm sure they think I'm like a jackhammer outside my house.
That's so funny.
It's just, I just roll with it because if I have you, Kim, if you and I were sitting on my couch in my family room, am I going to pause our conversation because the woodpecker started?
Right. Yeah. No.
No.
Yeah.
If we're talking about book marketing, wherever we are we going to stop because, let's say we're at a conference, which we've been at before, and we're talking book marketing or podcasting, and a guy comes by with the trash bin, blah, 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 fumbling by. Are we going to stop our conversation? Probably not.
Yeah.
Lean in a little closer and talk a little louder, and not that I can get much louder, but so, but it's like being real.
Yes.
No, I don't ever want to put on one persona in my book or my podcast or on social media that I am not going to do in front of you. So, a lot of times I'll go on and to do a reel. And before I do a reel on Instagram, I'm like, oh man, look at me. I don't have makeup on.
Yes.
done. So then you'll see me throw on a pair of sunglasses. So every time you see my reel with my sunglasses on, you know Billie does not have makeup on. But you find ways to get around it. Like, and I go on sometimes with no makeup on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a reel, I think yesterday, the day before yesterday, I've been traveling a ton. I've been on like 8 flights in 8 days. And I look so tired and haggard. I didn't even like looking at myself in the mirror, no less than doing a reel. And I just throw on a pair of sunglasses. I'm like, Lord, I'm not going to have my vanity stop me from getting, it was actually yesterday. I had a lady treat someone really rude in front of me. And so I'm like, I'm going on Instagram.
Yeah.
We do not need to let people steal our joy because they're angry and bitter.
Yeah.
You know? So I just threw on a pair of sunglasses. I come back from the massage and I just did it. You just get over the comparison, the competitiveness, just be you and do you and get on that microphone and just start talking and talk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Oh, I love that so much, Billie. Well, yay. I can't wait for everybody to check out your book, Baseball Family, and your podcast. And I'll be sure and put links to all that in the show notes so everybody can get a hold of you and get all your goodies, Billie. And thank you so much for this today. I'm just so appreciative of it.
Thank you, my dear. It's always good being with you.
So is your head spinning with ways to share your book on your own podcast to continue serving your readers long after your book release? I just love Billie's heart. So be sure to check out her book and her podcast in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in today. And as always, I'll be there for you to help you build your audience and reach new readers one podcast at a time. See you then.